Liam, we are being told now it has been held. It's been held at 5.25%. Wow. Your reaction?
That's very, very interesting. What's going to happen now is that the pound will likely fall because traders were expecting an interest rate rise on balance. What will happen now is so-called two-year swap rates will change, so mortgage companies quite quickly will start competing and offering cheaper loans. We've already had mortgage rates coming down over recent weeks because of an expectation that this would be the peak in interest rates if indeed there was a rate rise. If we look at my graphic now, I hope it's on the screen, you can see that rates have been ultra low, 0.1% back in 2021. They stayed really low during the COVID pandemic period. Then we had those 14 consecutive rate rises, all the way up to 5.25%. With this hold, there will now be a wave of opinion that UK interest rates have now peaked. I certainly hope that's the case, because that would certainly boost our ailing economy and would boost consumer sentiment and would be a considerable relief for the millions of young families around the country who are struggling to meet rising mortgage payments. This, in my view, is good news.
And Liam, to have good news twice in 2 days feels extraordinary, doesn't it? It's been such a long time since millions of homeowners and business owners have had news like this, particularly with mortgage owners who are being squeezed at both ends on soaring repayments on their properties and also the price of their food, their petrol, their electricity. Fantastic news at long last. What do you think this means for the kind of recovery of the UK economy in general now?
Well, let's not get beyond ourselves. They have held rates. They're not bringing rates down, but it's certainly better, in my view, than a rate rise. I do think this could at least be a waypoint towards the end of the cost of living crisis. Businesses will now start to believe that they can start to borrow to invest because hopefully rates are now clearly coming down. Households will start to believe that there's an end to their misery of rising fuel payments, rising energy costs, rising mortgage payments, which have really acted as a dampener on consumer sentiment and retail sales more generally. Look, there are many possible flies in this ointment. We could easily have another energy price spike this autumn. It depends a lot now on geopolitics. What's geopolitics? That's the really big picture of how countries interact with each other strategically. Geopolitics means, what will the OPEC oil exporters cartel do? Will they try and squeeze the Western world even more by pushing up the price of oil from where it currently is, $95 a barrel, up from $70 earlier this summer? That's a 35% rise that almost no one has been talking about on television, but it's absolutely huge economically. Will the OPEC exporters cartel, working with the Russians, energy giants Saudi and Russia working together, push oil over $100 a barrel and once again complicate the Western world's ability to tackle inflation? Many imponderables. Economics is always about risk and uncertainty, Martin and Pip, but you're absolutely right. Yesterday's inflation down. UK interest rates today held. Good news, good news. Thank you very much.
Liam, I need to keep you there. I know you might like to go and have a drink after that news, but I just need to keep you there for a second. I think what I was asking you now was, if they've been held, will we see them come down further? And could we, over the coming months now, see us get closer to maybe 4%?
I don't think we'll see 4% for a while, Pip, in terms of the Bank of England's base rate, with all respect. I mean, I've been looking down the barrel of a camera talking to you since the decision. I haven't read the Bank of England's press release. I haven't read the minutes of the Monetary Policy Committee. I will as soon as I get off camera, and I'll come to you again later in your show and tell you what I think is really going on, because it depends on what the Monetary Policy Committee thinks. I suspect this was a knife-edge decision, either 5-4 in favour of a hold, or possibly 6-3 in favour of a hold. That's among the 9 economists on the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee. But it strikes me that one strategy they may have will be a kind of tabletop mountain strategy. You take rates to a certain period, a point, and then you keep them flat and high in order to really squeeze inflation expectations out of the system, to push down on wage bargaining, to slow the economy right down, to get rid of those upward price pressures. Or instead of going for a sort of tabletop mountain type model. They could go for an alpine mountain, a peak with rates touching 5.25, staying there and then coming down rapidly.
Liam?
It all depends on the data, Pip. Economics is what we call iterative. You have to decide as you go, as new information comes to the fore.
Liam, I just want to get your thoughts because we are getting more information now, and it was a very close decision.
Yep.
4 people of
5-4?
the 9 people on the committee voted to raise the rates. 4 of them voted to raise.
Yeah. Yeah. And that means 5 must have voted to hold. So that is as close as it gets by a whisker. It'll be really interesting to see who that swing voter was, and it'll be really interesting to see what side of that divide the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, was on. Was he on the side that won, or was he outvoted with other members of the Monetary Policy Committee, MPC members from outside the Bank of England, the so-called independent members? They're not really independent enough for my taste, by the way, but they are non-Bank of England staffers. It will be interesting to see if the Governor was outvoted. Andrew Bailey's come in for a lot of criticism over the last couple of years for saying repeatedly during 2020 and 2021 that post-pandemic inflation would be, quote, transitory. Many of us told him it wouldn't be transitory. Many of us told them that after the pandemic there'll be a real inflation spike as a wall of demand hit a global economy which couldn't respond in time because of post-pandemic supply chain issues. The Bank of England wouldn't have it. They were completely wrong. They were late in starting to raise interest rates, and Andrew Bailey was the figurehead of those errors. Is he now on the wrong side of his own Monetary Policy Committee, which he chairs? That's what I'll be looking for as soon as I get off this discussion.
Can I just
with
get
you,
one other
very
final thought from you,
position.
Liam? Just one final thought, because this information is coming in as you're talking. The Monetary Policy Committee also downgraded its forecast for the economy. It now expects GDP to rise just 0.1% in the third quarter of this year, compared with the 0.4 rise that it forecast last month.
I find that baffling. I'll have to see why they think that. That's certainly not what a lot of private sector forecasters think. I mean, it was only a few weeks ago that the Office for National Statistics found, if I can put it like this, a whole load of growth down the back of the sofa that they hadn't considered. So our GDP performance was enormously upgraded. It may be, though, that in order to try and justify that interest rate hold, the bank is forecasting that the economy is going to be more subdued. I'll have to look into the details of that. That does seem to me to be a slightly odd position for the Bank of England to take. But look, it's easy for me to stand outside on the street and talk. The people on the MPC, they have got a difficult job navigating us through this very difficult period. But for my money, Pip and Martin, today, they made the right decision.
And Liam, just before we let you go, there are rumours of protests today outside the Bank of England. Did anything occur?
Yeah, it was a very it wasn't a particularly energetic protest. It was a small number of people, maybe a dozen, calling for no more rate rises and calling for a windfall tax on the UK's banking sector. I think, by the way, the second of those two issues, a windfall tax on banks, will very much come into the offing in the months to come ahead of a general election. I wouldn't be surprised if certainly the Labour Party made a formal proposal in their manifesto for a windfall tax on banks, the same way that the Conservatives have obviously done a windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas providers. But it wasn't a violent protest. It was very good-natured, very good-humoured, and it certainly hasn't bothered me as I've been broadcasting here to GB News viewers and listeners.
Liam, thank you so much. Just to bring you as well some reaction from the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey. He says inflation's fallen a lot in recent months. We think it will continue to do so. That is welcome news. But there is no room for complacency, he warns. We need to be sure inflation returns to normal, and we will continue to take the decisions necessary to do just that. That is the latest comments from the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey.
Yeah, and it was 5-4 voting in favour of holding rates versus 6-3 in favour of rising them back in August. So it seems A nice calm settled into the Bank of England. Thank you, Liam Halligan, for twice in 1 week bringing us and millions of people watching, homeowners and business owners, some fantastic news.
More reaction coming in from the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. He is saying the UK is starting to see the tide turn against high inflation.